It's day 2 of our sew along. I hope you're enjoying this fun little sew along as we make our Carolina Herrera Inspiration Dress that Megan Markle wore. Today is all about that bodice. So we're going to be working together to sew the pieces together. Make sure that you have already cut out all of your bodice, front, back, sleeve, front, sleeve, back pieces if you're following along the pattern that I am using, which again, McCalls 7745. That's the one we're focused on today, right here, view D, making that bodice. It also calls for a lining, so make sure that you've cut out your lining fabric as well. And I'm going to walk you through the steps that you need to sew together your bodice, so stay tuned. So you should have traced all of and transferred all of your pattern markings onto your pieces. So we're going to begin by taking our front bodice pieces and sewing in that dart. Go ahead and sew in your dart now and press the seam down. So here I've sewn in my dart, and on the back you can see I have pressed the seam going down. One quick tip, because this is a lined dress, sometimes I like to practice, so to speak, on my lining fabric. So I actually, even though the instructions don't say to do the lining first, they say to do the main fabric first, sometimes I will go ahead and construct following the instructions for the lining first, just so I kind of get a practice run at it and don't make any major mistakes when it comes to the main fabric. And especially in this case where I am running short on fabric, I'm really trying to do that to make sure I don't make any silly mistakes. So here you can see I have gone ahead and followed the next couple steps. So the first thing that you're going to do is sew in your dart, press the seam going down, and then you're going to sew in your sleeve pieces. You should have cut out your sleeve front and sleeve back pieces. And what you're going to do next is go ahead and sew those together, matching your notches here. So you'll be putting that right sides together and stitching down that seam with a 5/8 inch seam allowance. Then you're going to go back and trim this seam, clip it about a 1/4 inch seam allowance will be left, and clip along the curve and press it. So go ahead and do that now with your sleeve pieces. So you want to line up your notches in your arm. I typically don't use pins when I sew, but for the purpose of the sew along, I'm going to go ahead and do that. Okay, I'm going to start at the bottom, line up with 5/8 inch seam allowance, and stitch. Make sure you're back stitching at both ends to lock your stitch. Go ahead and clip your threads now so you don't need to do that later. And you're going to want to trim this bulk seam allowance down to about 1/4 inch. Now you can let the garment kind of speak for you about where it wants to be clipped. By kind of trying to pull it open, you can see where it wants to be clipped around, or you can just go ahead and put in your clips around your stitching. You want to clip up to the stitching line without going through the stitching line. So once you feel like you've put in enough clips, you're going to take it over to your ironing board and press it. And I like to use a pressing ham at this time because this is a curved seam for the shoulder and you want to keep that shape to it. Once you've sewn your sleeve pieces together and you've clipped that seam allowance and pressed it along that curve, you're going to go ahead and attach your sleeve pieces. According to the pattern, you're going to attach the sleeve back piece to the bodice back, and you're going to attach the sleeve front piece to the front. And you're starting and stopping at your dots on your patterns that you should have transferred in your markings. So go ahead and do that now. Okay, so once you've done that, and again, this is my lining fabric that I'm showing you kind of my sample on, and you have that stitch, you should have 2 pieces. You basically have your front wrap on one side with the sleeve attached to the back. And because we're adding that center back zip, this is in two separate pieces right now, unlike the pattern that would only have one bodice back. So you should have two pieces that look like this, one for the left side and one for the right. And then you'll want to go ahead and make sure that your main fabric is stitched in the same manner. So go ahead and make sure that you've sewn both the front main fabric and the lining fabric for the bodice in all these steps. Okay, you should now have your two front bodice pieces sewn with your main fabric and your lining fabric. And we're going to line those up and stitch them together. So ours is following a little bit different than the pattern because we're not doing a true wrap here, so we're not inserting the ribbon that the pattern calls for. We're also not finishing the bottom of our lining yet because I'm still determining how I want to attach it in the end. So right now I'm just going to match center fronts with the sleeve all the way around and keep pinning all the way through. I totally just did that backwards if you noticed, sorry. This side, match it all the way around and pin it. And then we're going to be stitching that all the way until we get to this back bodice piece. And at the back of the bodice, the center back, you may notice that mine is a little bit off. And the reason for that is I goofed when cutting my main fabric piece and I did not have enough to recut the bodice. So instead I'm going to have to cheat to give myself an extra ½ inch here, not even 5/8 inch in the back, by taking it from my side seams a little bit. So go ahead and do that now. Stitch that using your 5/8 inch seam allowance all the way around that front on both sides to attach your lining to your main fabric. Okay, so I've gone ahead and I've stitched this front to this front bodice piece to the lining all the way around. Okay, you're going to take your piece that you just sewed together and you're going to trim this seam allowance down to 1/4 inch, press it towards the lining, and then understitch it all the way around. You're going to repeat this on both sides. Okay, once you've gone back and you've understitched, which remember your understitching is going to be just a straight stitch on the lining side, catching that pressed edge underneath. It's just about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge. So go ahead and turn it back right sides together. And now you're going to take your sleeve piece and you're going to stitch it from your dots, your markings on each side of that under edge of the sleeve. After you've done that, when you turn it right side out, you can pull it all the way through and go ahead and give it a good press, and you'll be able to see that's going to finish your arm edge with the lining underneath the fabric, and that's going to finish your center front. If I can get my fabric to cooperate, it's going to finish your center front edge with a clean line as well, all the way around your neckline and towards your center back. So make sure you go ahead and do that on both pieces, and then we are almost through with our bodice. So this is our piece so far, stitched together with our armhole, and now we're basically going to turn it out and line up our lining pieces and pin them together. So our lining's going to be right sides together. Now, I had a little bit of trouble when it came to my sleeve length. I'm not sure if it was the grading that I did or what, but I had some trouble with getting my seams to line up, and so I'm going to have to kind of make a little bit of an adjustment here when I stitch these right sides of the side seams together. I actually have to make two adjustments. One, I have to cheat and take a smaller seam allowance on my side seam on my main fabric because I do not have enough of a center back seam of my lining. And then two, you can see here, my sleeves just didn't go down the way that they should have. So I'm going to have to play with this at my machine a little bit and make sure that when I stitch these together, it lines up, and I can do, you're supposed to be doing one continuous line from one side of the bodice all the way across, all the way down on the lining. And it should just be one line. But you can see here, and obviously from starting and stopping at those pieces where you put your sleeves together, mine just didn't quite line up like I feel that they should have from the pattern. So I'm going to have to fidget with mine, but hopefully if you're following along, yours is a little bit cleaner and you didn't have any issues with your sleeve pieces. I'm not, like I said, I'm not totally sure why I was falling short here, but it was from these pieces, like from the top of the sleeve all the way to the underseam. Mine just wasn't long enough, and I'm not really sure what I might have done wrong. So I'm going to have to kind of play with it in this stage to make it work. Well, approximately 25 tries later, I am mostly satisfied with my side stitching. So the part that was giving me trouble was this underarm seam, and it's basically just the way that they attach it, that you stitch from the front all the way through the back. And because I was having a little bit of trouble with my length on this, it just really messed me up. So it took me many times, but again, if yours, just a minute, Henry, but if your sleeves are long enough in the beginning, you shouldn't come to this problem like I had. So just a little mistake that I made, and hopefully I can save you from that same one. Just making sure that that is long enough in the beginning so that you don't run into any issues when you're doing that underarm stitching. Okay, so we are now at the part of the bodice that we have the full lining attached underneath, and we have both sides of our bodice sewn, and our back is not attached because we will be putting in a zipper. So normally in the pattern you would be sewing on the skirt and then it's a wrap closure, and ours is obviously going to be a little bit different since ours is a faux wrap in the front and we're going to be inserting the zipper. So what I would recommend doing now is trying this on. You could put a couple pins through the back or have somebody do that, and what I want you to do is try it on and pin your front overlap together how you would like it to go, and get that fit across the front, matching your center front lines from where you drew them on in your pattern. And then you're going to baste that together right here along the waist. Now we do have a lining in this, and to make it simpler on myself, I'm not going to separate the two and treat it as I normally would a lining and then have the lining, you know, be turned up, because this whole cross front section and everything like that would be really difficult to do. So I'm going to go ahead at this point and treat the lining and the main fabric piece as one. And if you want to, you could actually baste all the way around this whole piece on both sides just to hold that together a little bit better along the bottom. So yes, that's a little bit different than what you would normally do with lining a dress, but for simplicity's sake, I'm going to go ahead and do that on this make. So go ahead and try yours on and pin it, make sure it's matching center front and it's lining up the way you want it to, and baste that together around the bottom edge. So make sure when you're trying yours on that you are trying it on with the bra that you're going to be wearing with it. It definitely changes the fit quite a bit. So I'm fairly happy with it, but I do not like kind of this gaping I'm getting right here. So I'm going to work on taking that in just a little bit on this front arm seam and see if I can get this to sit a little bit better and closer to my body. But otherwise, I'm fairly happy with it. I like the V about right here. I may be putting a little snap or something in there because it does kind of gape open a little bit when moving around. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out once I have the belt on and the skirt piece. But I can tell just from moving that this piece is not lying on me exactly how I would like. So make sure you're trying yours on now, making any adjustments for your own body, any fit adjustments. But overall, I just have mine pinned where my zipper will go, and you can kind of get a feel for your fit. But overall, I'm happy with the way it's looking so far. So for mine, just to kind of show you what I did here for the fit difference, you can see this side I haven't done anything yet, and this side I basically went back in. I removed this edge stitching that we did, or under stitching that we did on the lining. I took out about 2 inches on this seam on both sides, and this is just basted right now, but I kind of cut it in at a wedge and took about 1/4 inch out, and I did that on both the main piece and the lining, and then put it back together to see what I thought. So I'm pretty happy with that adjustment. I'm going to go ahead and repeat that on this side and then put in the final stitches on that, redo that edge under stitching that was there, and put it back together. Congrats! You've made your bodice. I hope you're happy with it and you've gotten the fit the way that you want it to be. You have it basted across, you have your cross fronts where you want them to fall, the sleeves look the way you do, and if you were like me, maybe you needed to make a little bit of a fitting adjustment in there, and hopefully you were able to go ahead and get that all done. I hope you feel accomplished that we've put together the whole bodice, minus the zipper. But we're going to come back tomorrow and I'm going to be showing you how to sew together that skirt, which is my favorite part. So stay tuned. Make sure you like or subscribe so you get the next update when I publish it. Till later, happy sewing.